Hello, horror fans. Pete here from the Lasser Cast, and I am with my good friend with the hottest fucking shirt you could ever imagine, right over there, Dr. Zayas God, Danny Torkel. Danny, stand up and show your shirt, please, to everyone. Look at that. Oh, so sexy. I'm jealous.
This is one of those like Facebook obviously spying on me was like, we think you'd like this, and I went, don't read my mind, Facebook. And then I clicked please purchase, and now it was my first day of work shirt. I'm very proud of it.
Well, you're going to have to stand up and point to the movie if we reference any of these movies today. We are going over the 101 scariest horror movie moments of all time, which just debuted on Shudder. It's part of their whole special leading all the way up to Halloween. And every week, they're going to have a new episode covering some of the scariest moments that are in horror movies. So last night, we got moments 101 all the way to 89. And Danny and I are here to discuss it. We want to hear what you guys have to say about it, too. So make sure in the comments, you're telling us if you agree or disagree with their choices.
Now, before we get into this, Pete, I got to ask you, did you ever watch the Bravo 100 Scariest Horror Movie Moments that was done? It's got to be like 15, maybe 10 to 15 years ago. Do you remember? Did you ever watch that?
I didn't watch it like all the way through from like 100 to 1, but I definitely have seen a lot of it. Yes.
Okay, because like that was a huge event for like horror geeks like me. We like watched it and talked about it and argued about it like losers. like the typical horror nerds and geeks we are.
Yes.
And I love that Shudder has revisited this because it's been so many years later. There have been so many great horror movies over the last 2 decades that deserve inclusion. I'm just really excited. I also think they got an amazing crop of talking heads to talk about these movie moments. Yeah, this is like a real murderer's row of people in the horror industry, directors, writers, actors, film historians, people that are the curator of Shudder. It was on there, Sam Zimmerman. I wrote a list down. I can go through a few of them if you want, just to like.
I would love for you to do that, yes, because I want to talk about that list.
Well, the guy whose name we took for this channel, the Lasser Glass of Mike Flanagan. Mike Flanagan himself was there with Kate Siegel, his muse, partner in crime, wife, co-writer, partner. Bree Grant, Greg Nicotero, Tony Todd, Gigi Saul Guerrero, Keith David, Tananarive Dew, Axel Caroline, Ernest Dickerson, Alex Iso, Edgar Wright, Rebecca McKendry, who we just reviewed Glorious on this channel not too long ago. That's her film, also on Shudder. Yes. Andy Muschietti, the director of It's Chapter 1 and 2. I mentioned Sam Zimmerman. David Dasmalkian was there. And Joe Dante, only one of the most, legendary horror filmmakers, The Howling, Gremlins. So just an unbelievable murderer's row of talking heads. I think when you're doing a documentary style like this, a list like this, the quality of the overall product, no matter if we agree with the list or not, it always feels better. It always feels like a bigger thing when you have these types of people, such respected names in the horror community. Really, and that wasn't everybody, but that was as many as I could write down in 46 minutes.
Yes. It's funny because for our channel, we've actually talked about documentaries quite a few times. We've talked about horror noir. We've talked about In Search of Darkness 1 and 2. We've talked about In Search of Tomorrow. And it's kind of ironic. It's like one of those mirrors, like a mirror reflected in a mirror, because there's people talking about horror movies, and then we're talking about them talking about horror movies. But the thing is that I eat this stuff up. I love hearing people that have a passion for horror movies talking about horror movies. I mean, that's kind of why we do this channel in the first place, just so we can talk like them, right? If you guys ever want to have us on a documentary, by the way, the Lasser Cast, But anyway, I was really surprised with the level of talent that they got to, commentate on the movies. And it's kind of funny because I just mentioned In Search of Darkness. I just mentioned Horror Noir. Both of them have been on Shudder before, and it looks like they just kind of brought some of those guests from those documentaries onto here.
The other thing, and this will be the last thing I say before we get into the list.
Sure.
What I love about especially documentaries like this, In Search of Tomorrow, the ones you mentioned, In Search of Darkness 1, 2, Tomorrow, even Horror Noir, they serve as obviously they serve as teaching tools, and they talk about the era and the time period, but even more than that, these serve as actual lists for horror fans to kind of check off ones that they've missed. Like Charlotte, what really helped Charlotte get into horror more than just me going, you should watch this movie, was Eli Roth's History of Horror, which was also produced, and a lot of episodes were written and directed by Kurt Sayenga, who is the executive producer of this series. So, like, I cannot wait to rewatch this episode later on with her. And, she'll kind of start to make a list. She's seen a few of these movies. So, like, for her, this list of 101 movie moments is going to serve as like, here's the ones that you really need to catch up on. Here's the ones you have to check off your personal list while you're watching this documentary series about a list of horror movies.
Yeah, well put. I mean, I hate to admit this, but I actually have not seen the majority of the movies on this first list from 101 to 89. So I was thinking that when we go through each entry, you and I can say if we've seen the movie, and obviously we will give our 2 cents if we have seen the movie. So just getting started right away, number 101 was the beginning of It Follows. And I'm just going to go right off the record right here and say, I actually have not seen It Follows.
Oh, yet. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say that I don't love It Follows as much as other people, but there are at least 2 moments in It Follows that genuinely I found really scary. One of them they actually show just in like the kind of background where there's this old woman who just constantly is just walking towards the screen, following the main character later on in the film. But this opening scene is unbelievable. It really is. It's a great opening scene for this, what this movie is about. And again, if you haven't watched this yet, we are going to go through the list. We're going to spoil the list for you from 101 to 89. So if you don't want to know what the movies are in the list, go on Shudder now. It's a 46-minute episode. Watch it and then come back and hear us talk about them.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I need to watch It Follows. There's no doubt about that. It's been a big talking point for horror fans since it came out. And it's just one of those things I just haven't got around to it because I'm always watching content for our channel. But I'm going to make a point to watch it probably this Halloween season.
Yeah,
that might be what I do in October.
The best part is nothing really got spoiled for you because they only show you the opening scene. So, and the opening scene it's really brilliant.
Yeah. So one thing I'm curious about when we watch this though is when you watch these moments, Danny, and you've seen these movies, do you sit there and think, oh, they ranked this really low, like 101? That's really low on the list. Like, do you think that is a fair place to put the beginning of It Follows?
It's hard to tell, obviously. I don't think it's unfair because there were 100. I'm thinking back to Bravo's list now. There were already like Bravo had a list of 100 before It Follows ever came out. So I don't know. I didn't love It Follows as much as a lot of other horror fans, so it didn't bother me that it was low. We'll talk about, there was one scene in particular from this list that I thought I was shocked how high it was on the list. you also brought up something. One of my questions, a lot of times when people make lists like this, they tend to say, okay, well, we already hit this movie, so that's it.
Mm.
The greatest horror movies, the best ones, the ones on my shirt, have multiple moments. So I'm really curious. Like, obviously, Bravo's all-time number one was the opening scene of Jaws.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not going to argue it. It's my all-time favorite horror movie. It's an
Yeah.
incredible introduction to the movie. It's scary as hell. But also, I'd argue that when the shark first pops up and scares Brody on the boat, that amazing jump scare, which leads him to drift back and go, "You're going to need a bigger boat."
Yeah.
That would also be a moment on my list. So
Right.
I'm curious if they're going to go back to movies or if it's just going to be 101 horror movies with the moments from them. I'm curious.
That's a really good
think
question.
it's probably going to be one moment per movie, if I had to guess.
Yeah, because there's just so many amazing movies to draw from, right? And they've already kind of alluded to some, like The Exorcist and Dawn of the Dead and Ouija Shark and just a whole bunch, you know?
That's probably in the top 10. You're right.
At least, yes. So, going with our list, we just crossed off 101. So that's one that I haven't seen. And now we have 100, which is The Orphanage. And it's this sequence, which is it's almost like a red light, green light game that this woman plays with ghosts. And it's 1, 2, 3, and she's knocking on the wall. I have seen The Orphanage, and I actually really like The Orphanage a lot. And I think that it deserves to be on this list. I'm a big fan. That sequence is very well shot. What about you? I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah, I really like this scene. I don't know if you remember the whole movie, but there's one scene where I think there was a car accident where one of the bodies, like the mouth like drops open, where I almost screamed in the living room watching it. So it wasn't that scene, but there was at least one scene in The Orphanage that really got me. I think it's a brilliant horror film. It reminds me a lot of early Guillermo del Toro. I think he might have produced it.
You produced it, yeah.
Yeah. And it reminds me a lot of like his earlier films, like The Devil's Backbone and Kronos, before he like got into Hellboy and started to get really huge budgets for his work. If you haven't seen it, it's a great little horror film.
Yes. That movie has what we often talk about on this show, like just atmosphere. I just remember the atmosphere of that movie. You know, it's like palpable, right? And they commented on that scene. They said that basically it's all one take, and she's knocking on the wall, and then she's turning around, and the ghosts are getting closer, and they're getting closer. And it's so simple. I think what's his face? The guy that did Andy Muschietti, I think he was the one that was talking about it on the show, and he was talking about how it's such a simple thing to do, but just so effective and scary. And I don't think I could put it better myself, you know?
Yeah. No, I agree.
So now here comes up number 99, and I'm wondering if this is the one that you were shocked. Now you said so high, but I'm assuming that you meant low on the list, right?
I mean, the scene with the vampire kids hovering outside the window in Salem's Lot is universally considered to be a top 10 scare of all time. Like people, and this is not just me talking, this is like most people in horror, like most horror fans, and even people in the horror industry, when they talk about moments that terrified them, the kids hovering outside the window in Salem's Lot is that moment. Especially if you're around our age or a little bit older. This Salem's Lot came out in, I think, 79 or 80 on TV, but it was making the rounds on TV all the time when we were growing up. And oh my God, that scene gave me nightmares. When I saw that it was 99, I was like, they better have 98 more terrifying moments. And not to disparage the rest of the list to 89, but this for me would have had to have been way down towards the, I would put it top 25 to 20.
Yeah. So I think one thing we should do moving forward, right, is that if it's like a number one movie or top 10, we should say that that is uh that's high on the list, right? And then like 100 and stuff is low.
Okay,
Right.
you're right.
Yeah.
It's
So that way we're
weird.
on the
We're
same
moving
page.
down, but we're getting hot. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's confusing, but yeah. So it's interesting because they had Mick Garris on too. That I don't think he was in your Murderers Row that you mentioned, but yeah, but Mick Garris is one of the people commenting, and it's kind of funny because he has made some of these made-for-TV miniseries based on Stephen King books, and it was interesting to hear him talk about a movie that was made by Tobe Hooper. And one of the comments that Mick Garris made was that at that time, you really didn't have people that appreciated horror making horror movies on TV. And so to have Tobe Hooper make it, that was something different. And I have never seen Salem's Lot, and that's something I also need to rectify. And I just really want to see that. Don't they actually have a Salem's Lot remake coming out, like as a movie?
I think so. There have been a few versions of it, but Salem's Lot is on Shudder.
Okay.
I think they have a Stephen King like collection,
Oh.
and it's long. It was a TV movie. It's like over 3 hours, but it's worth sitting through because it's really good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious. Have you seen number 98, Horror of Dracula?
I have, and I love this moment, and I think it's well deserved to be on the list. It's Christopher Lee's, like, his introduction as Dracula, not just the "Hi, I'm Dracula," but then the scene where the camera flashes back to him and he's got the blood red eyes and the blood dripping from his fangs. It is one of the greatest moments of Dracula in movie history, from Bela Lugosi to Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. That is probably, and I think you heard this from some of the people talking about it, it is probably, with maybe the exception of Bela Lugosi, what most people consider to be the definitive Dracula moment is Christopher Lee with the bloody fangs and the bloodshot eyes in this Hammer film. This is this and Frankenstein. I forgot the name of the Hammer Frankenstein, if it was Curse of Frankenstein, but those were the first two Hammer horror films, and they're the ones that like got the whole Hammer horror train running. And Christopher Lee he was a perfect Dracula.
Yes.
He was so good.
Yeah, I have not seen it, but you know that like The Wicker Man is like my favorite horror movie, right? With Christopher Lee. And so, I mean, I love him in everything that he's in that I've seen as well. I know that image, like as a guy who has like put footage and stuff into our videos, I often see that exact image of him as Dracula. And that's what they even say in the documentaries. Like, that's like this definitive image of Dracula. And they talk about how he's like menacing, almost like a panther in that scene. And that the female vampire is like a feral cat. And I think it's so well done. I have to go and watch this movie at some point.
Yeah. The early Hammer stuff is really good. I mean, there are parts of it that are dated, but I really love it's a great companion. They're great companion pieces to the Universal horror films.
Yes. Well, maybe we should do like a Hammer month at some point on the Lastercast.
Okay.
Twist my arm. Twist your arm, huh? Yeah. All right. Well, then let me ask you this. Black Sabbath, number 97. Have you seen that one?
Ozzy wrong Black Sabbath.
Right.
Yes, I have. I've actually seen this multiple times. I went through an Italian horror phase. I think it might have been towards the beginning of the pandemic, where I kind of blew through about 5 or 6 Bava movies and then almost all of Dario Argento's stuff. And Black Sabbath it's the second Black movie he did. He did Black Sunday, which I'm sure will be on this list at some point. And Black Sabbath is a not Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff introduced anthology. And the scene that they picked, oh my God, one of the creepiest dead body images you'll ever see. this old woman in what was it called? The dripping water or drop of water.
The drop of water.
That's the segment. And oh
Yeah.
my God, just the look on that woman's face will give you a nightmare. It's great, and it's a fun little anthology. If you haven't, I think Shudder. I think it's on Shudder also. If you haven't checked it out, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I thought that like just showing that particular story to Pepper, I thought that might like really freak her out and she'd like it, you know. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm down. I actually have not seen number 96 either. Pulse.
So this is one of the 2 movies on the list so far that I haven't seen. I've like you said, you know, when you watch enough of these type of shows, whether it's history of horror or horror documentaries, you end up seeing parts of this. I've seen parts of this many times. The movie is Pulse, or I think in it was called Cairo, Kairo.
Yes.
Yeah, and I haven't seen it, but I know that it is considered to be one of the better Asian horror films of like that late 90s, early 2000s period when they got super popular, in part due to the success of The Ring and The Grudge. And people started to say, oh, well, if these American remakes are so scary, where did they come from? And because they made a remake of this, I think, and I think I remember hearing it was terrible. I'm
okay.
But so I mean, maybe that's why I never watched it. But again, I've circled it. It's a movie I have to get back to.
Okay, yeah. I mean, what they showed looked really unnerving to me. Like, I don't know exactly what happens in it, but it just looked like the kind of thing that you're just so uncomfortable watching. Like, if you were watching it in the theater, you'd be very unsettled. It didn't look like you kind of like in your face, crazy jump scare horror, but instead like just stuff where you just are like, oh, I gotta get out of here. You know, that was kind of the vibe I got just from watching this short clip, you know?
Yeah, it has a lot of that like slow creeping dread. But that's a lot of that Japanese Asian horror from that time. Like even the Ring, you know, the way that and in the original Ringu also, the way that, you know, she slowly approaches the TV. In The Grudge, the most unsettling parts of The Grudge are the way the ghost creeps down the steps ever so slowly, like with the head turning. They're masters of like that creepy, impending dread feeling. It's
I haven't seen anything on this list so far that I'm like, oh, you know, I'll get around to it. Like every single entry so far has been like, yeah, I want to watch this. And so, I mean, that's on there too. Finally, we've gotten to another one that I have seen. So I've seen The Orphanage and I've seen this movie, The Strangers. I am a big fan of this movie. I think that in general, and they talk about this in the description too, that it's so good in the sense of your space being violated. And I think that the scene that they reference for their clip is when they finally have Liv Tyler and her husband tied up, and she asks the famous question, you know, why did you pick us? And then the strangers say, because you were home. And you know, that in itself is just like, that's a horror movie classic moment right there from like the last 20 years.
Oh yeah.
But they also did reference, because I think like what they do on this show is they mention one moment, but they kind of allude to another moment too.
Yeah.
And so they mentioned the male stranger just kind of standing out of you know, off to the side of the frame, and that part is very scary.
Which when they brought up the strangers, in my head, it immediately went to that moment, because that to me that's pure horror movie stuff. Like, yeah, the guy could run out and kill you, but to just show his head, you know, he's now in the house. She doesn't turn around, and then when she finally does, he's not there. And then you hear a noise, and now it's like, oh crap, don't go there. Now I know somebody's there. I know, you know. So I thought they were going with that as the moment, and then they switched it up and went with the because you were home, which is equally as disturbing. You know, because somebody referenced it and they said that's like the only thing you don't want to hear from like somebody who breaks into your house, because you hope that they say like, you know, we're here for the money, or we're here for, you know, because okay, I can give you whatever you want if it means you're going to get out. But
Right.
if you're only here to torture and kill me, well, now I'm screwed. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I mean, what makes that line even more disturbing is that it's sort of like very random too. Like, because they would have gone and tortured someone else. And it's just that you just have bad luck and bad fate to, you know, it wasn't because they wanted to kill you in particular. It's just you were the only one. So yeah, totally, utterly chilling. I think that even though there is an Alfred Hitchcock movie further down on this list, that Stranger's Moment kind of reminds me of a thing that I remember Alfred Hitchcock saying, which is that like knowing that a character is like sitting on top of a bomb, but the character doesn't know about the bomb. That's what creates that feeling of tension. You know, when the audience is aware of something that the character is not. And I just think that that's the movie The Strangers has a lot of that in it. And I think that to me is always much more effective horror than like something like literally shattering through a window or something to get at someone, you know? Yeah. Even a jump scare where it's just a character that's just standing there versus like a character that jumps out for a second. I think that that's even more scary because it's like they're there. You just didn't know it. I mean, you already kind of said that too.
And the director is really into bleak stuff because he also did The Dark and the Wicked. Which is one of the bleakest horror films that I've seen over the last couple of years. Brian, I always think his name is Brian Boitano, and I start to sing the South Park song. It's like Brian Bertano, I think.
Yeah. We referenced his movie. We referenced that movie last week in our video. What the hell were we talking about last time?
Ouija Origin of Evil.
Ouija Origin of Evil. Yes, yes. Which makes me wonder, do you think that a Flanagan movie is going to get on this list?
I would have to say, I mean, 100%. I have to assume Baseball Boy from Dr. Sleep is somewhere on this list. Yeah. I mean, I know that, like, so I got to be honest, if we're talking about scariest moments, the scariest thing I think that Flanagan's ever put on screen is Nell in Haunting of Hill House leaping out of the back seat in the episode where the two sisters are driving to the house, because I almost freaking lost it when that happened. Like, I mean, so they're not going to put that on because that's a TV series. Probably not on there, but some of the moments in Gerald's Game with the Moonlight Man, like licking her feet, or the degloving. I mean, you know, there's a lot of moments like that in all of Flanagan's work. Like
what about when the friend is killed in Hush in the very beginning?
Well, I was gonna say, what about the moment in Hush where he just catches Kate Siegel and kills her, and you're like, what?
Yeah. right.
And then she's like, nope, that's not the ending, and you're like, oh.
right. Hey, you never know, because we have 88 entries to go after this episode, so we'll see.
I'm just gonna say Flanagan, Kate Siegel, and Alex Iso, who is in Dr. Sleep, we're all talking heads in this part one. So that leads me to believe that from a political standpoint, a moment from Dr. Sleep is probably on this list at some point.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. And Alex Iso is in Midnight Mass too, right? She's like the mother that has she's kind of lost her memory. And so who is she in Dr. Sleep again? I'm sorry. I can't believe I forgot.
She's Wendy. She's Wendy to young Danny at the beginning before he grows up to be Ewan McGregor.
Okay. Gotcha. Right.
And she
Okay.
does an
Okay. Right.
amazing Shelley Duvall.
Right. Okay. Yes. Okay. I remember now. Okay. Well, let's move on to number 94, which I'm embarrassed to admit I have not seen The Wolfman. Now, I have seen Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein many, many times, and I've seen The Wolfman, Lon Chaney's Wolfman. Oh, that's Lon Chaney Jr., right?
Yeah.
I've seen Lon Chaney Jr. in that many times, but I've never seen the original. So,
The Wolfman is my least favorite of the Universal Monster movies. That said, this is one of those that I feel like historical significance, like werewolf transformations have become such an important thing in any modern werewolf movie, going back to obviously The Howling and American Werewolf in London.
right.
And what's interesting is this was kind of a cheat entry because it's not just the Wolfman, it's really all of Lon Chaney Jr.'s transformations with the work of makeup artist Jack Pierce across, like you said, all of his Wolfman movies in the 40s, from the original Wolfman to Abbott and Costello to Frankenstein versus the Wolfman. It's really not just one moment from one movie. It's more like we're acknowledging the work of Jack Pierce and the makeup use of Lon Chaney Jr. As the Wolfman.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. And I mean, it is like revolutionary for its time. And I know that they did talk about Lon Chaney Jr.'s performance too and how good he was. And I can't remember which person, like maybe it was like Tony Todd or somebody said that, like, or maybe it was Keith David. It was Keith David, I think, where he was talking about like how he just empathized with him so much. You know, that's what Lon Chaney Jr. was good at, making you feel empathetic toward him. But I think it's interesting. No, I am so full of shit. It was David Desta. I can never say his fucking last name.
Oh,
What's
David
his last
Desmalkian. Yeah.
He's the one that said it. And that's where we got a little bit of Edgar Wright too. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting that they go from 94, which is The Wolfman, to Cat People, which, you know, is once again like it's people turning into an animal, kind of from the same time period. I'm assuming you've seen Cat People.
I have last year, or it's September now. It might have been, no, I think it was actually earlier this year. Shudder put up a Val Lewton collection. Val Lewton was a horror producer in the 40s for RKO, and he was doing these super low budget horror films. He did a whole bunch in a row, and they're all so good. They're so atmospheric. I actually want to shout out another YouTube channel that Chris turned me on to years ago, Dark Corners. Dark Corners, it's a English YouTuber who does bad movie reviews of like classic bad movies, but then he also does these in-depth like podcast kind of documentaries on YouTube about certain things. He does a great one on Ray Harryhausen, on Lon Chaney, and he just did one on the low budget filmmaking of Val Lewton. And it was like a 20-minute video, and I had just watched most of the movies on that list on Shudder. And Cat People is like the most iconic of the Val Lewton horror films. And the scene, the pool scene in Cat People that is talked about here is like probably the most iconic scene in the movie from a scare perspective.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah. I believe it was Bruce Dickerson, right? That's his name?
Ernest Dickerson.
Oh, I just took the lead singer of Iron Maiden and the guy that did Boys in the Hood. And no, not Boys. Oh my God.
No. The guy who did Ernest Dickerson did Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight,
right?
And Juice. He directed Juice also. Great.
Okay.
The Snoop Dogg horror movie also. Oh God.
Right.
Bones.
Yeah. I know who he is because I know you're actually a big fan of his work, and I just combined their two names. But I think that he was talking about in this moment. I could be completely wrong though too. About the idea of when you see something and you think that like like the audience sort of fills in the gap. Like they see something and they believe it's something that's there, maybe because it's the sound or the movement itself. But that's what he was saying, like the panther creature was like in that moment. And that's what's really cool about these old movies that seem so like tame and stuff and slow by our modern standards, but they can be just so scary just by the sheer fact that they're filmed in black and white, and they use their shadows. So I was very intrigued by that movie, and like once again, I want to check it out. I have not
They're
seen.
they're also
Okay.
all really short, like 75, 80 minutes.
Ooh, gotta love a short ass movie, right? So 92 is that Hitchcock movie that I mentioned. It is The Birds. So once we're kind of doing a whole bunch of like animal related ones, or Wolfman, Cat People, now The Birds. The Birds is a movie that I've seen a lot of bits from like over time because it would just be on cable and stuff when I was a kid, but I've not seen the whole movie through. I'm assuming you have.
Yeah, The Birds to me is it's good. I'm not the biggest fan of it. There's a lot of other Hitchcock movies I prefer. But like I get why The Birds is on there. Effectively, Hitchcock making a monster, like a nature, man versus nature horror movie, an eco monster movie. It has its moments, and the moment they used is probably, again, if you said to me, "Oh, The Birds is on there," which scene do you think it is? I'd be like, "Oh, probably the gas station scene where everything blows up and she ends up in the phone booth."
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what they picked.
Yeah. Well, listen, can you remind me when we get to 89, the last entry on here, because I feel like the entry for 89 is not the scariest moment in that movie, the last one. So you and I can talk about that in a minute too.
Okay.
But yeah, like I said, I've only seen The Birds when I was like really young, and I saw like it in clips. But I know that there's a lot of movies that are kind of like in that genre. The one I can think of like off the top of my head, who's not a good example, is The Happening. Kind of gives me that feeling of like, like what's going on, nature has changed. And I just remember as a kid that scene kind of freaked me out a lot because I remember seeing that scene multiple times. The next one on there, 91, I think that is such an interesting choice. I was not expecting David Lynch on this list.
So this is actually one I didn't see. I have a huge black spot or blind spot for David Lynch stuff. David Lynch is one of those directors where I have to like commit myself to just doing a week where I watch his movies. And I've never seen Mulholland Drive, but which is funny because I had seen. There you go. Very nice. I knew you were a big fan of Lynch.
Yeah.
It's funny because I had seen this scene before, but
Yes.
I had no clue what movie it's from.
Yeah.
So, and also apparently this is the beginning of the movie.
It's in the maybe like the second scene. Yes, it's within like the first 20 minutes. Yes.
So like I had seen clips of this like dirt covered character who just steps out and scares a man to death. And I honestly, I didn't know if it was, is this a horror movie? Is this a comedy? What movie is this from? And then when I saw that this was Mulholland Drive, I was like, huh? So now I'm like super intrigued to go and watch this. I know a lot of David Lynch fans who say that this is their favorite David Lynch movie. Mm-hmm. So maybe this is where I'll start. I've seen Blue Velvet.
Yes, yes.
Blue Velvet is absolutely insane. I loved it. Yeah. That is my type of crazy. And if most of his movies are that type of crazy, I'm probably going to enjoy this. I've also heard that a lot of his movies at the end of the day don't really make sense. And I'm like, but we'll see.
Yeah. I might almost recommend. Have you ever watched Twin Peaks, like the show?
No, that's I didn't.
Yeah, I think it's still on Netflix. You might want to check that out. That might be a good opener for him if you've already seen Blue Velvet. And then have you ever seen The Elephant Man?
Oh yes, I
Okay.
have that, but that
That's
doesn't
not really
feel
him.
that
No.
doesn't feel like David. It's a great film, but it doesn't
Yeah.
feel like David Lynch.
Yeah. I think that this particular clip from Mulholland Drive, I think that it's a good example of how in movies that aren't just straight up horror movies, you can have things that are scarier than in actual horror movies. And I'm trying to think of which actor. There was an actor they had on there. Oh, it was the guy that is like the new host of Mystery Science Theater. He's the guy that's with the robots now. And he was like, "Oh, what is this? It's like the most terrifying horror movie ever." Like, it's this weird thing where you're just not expecting it, super scary. And this isn't the scariest. Like David Lynch has done other movies that have very scary moments in them too. There's Lost Highway, there's Fire Walk with Me. And so he does have like things that are scarier than things that are in other horror movies.
Is
So I
Lost
think it's cool.
Highway is Lost Highway the one with like the pale face guy? Okay, see,
Hmm.
again, like I know bits of Lynch, but
Hmm.
I with the exception of Blue Velvet and The Elephant Man, I don't think I've seen any of his actual his full
You've probably
movies.
seen Dune too, right? With Kyle MacLachlan.
I never saw the original Dune. Oh, I was like, oh, we're done. All right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Well, I heard
no,
that
it's
he hates it, and it's like not good.
right. It's not. Yeah, and I know you don't even like the Denis Villeneuve one too much, but
It's fine.
it's fine. Well, we're going on a little David Lynch tangent here. We still got two more entries to go. This next moment, I think, from this movie, I think this is the best moment they could have picked from this movie. Do you disagree?
I do not disagree. I think this is the best moment. I also think this should be higher on the list.
Higher.
Yes, it should be a lower number on this list.
Yeah.
Because this number 90 is the scene in the original Child's Play where Chucky
Right.
springs to life against poor Catherine Hicks, the mom, after she
Right.
discovers that the batteries were included but are not in Chucky's back. It's an
Yes.
unbelievable moment. It's a scene that borders on comical and then gets real crazy real fast. And the reason I would put this higher on the list
Higher.
is
That's right.
I think Chucky has become such an important horror icon. Up there with the Freddys and the Jasons and the Michael Myers.
Yes.
That and he's also an icon that is still going strong today. Season 2 of Chucky is coming out in a month, the series.
Right.
So
Yeah.
this is an icon of horror that is not just truly up there with like the top 5 all-time slasher villains,
Right. Yeah.
but he's still going strong. And I felt that they kind of needed a little more, put a little respect on his name and give him higher than 90 on the list. Like he could have been in the top 50, like at least.
Yes.
Because
Yes,
I have
at
to
least.
assume, again, they're not going to put a moment from any of the Child's Play sequels now.
Right.
So I kind of feel like, Leatherface, Jason, Michael Myers, and Freddy, they're going to be way up on the list, probably in the top 20 to 30, maybe even top 10 material. So it feels a little off that Chucky is way down at 90. The moment itself, though, is brilliant. I love that they had Tom Holland, the original Tom Holland, not Spider-Man Tom Holland, the director.
Yeah.
I love that they had him there to talk about this moment. I love this movie. I love this franchise. I can't wait for the second season of Chucky to come out so I could watch and review it for the channel again.
Yes.
So yeah, I love that this moment made it. I just wish it was higher up on the list. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I have seen Child's Play. I think that moment is so great, and I have to take a moment to give praise to Brad Dourif because I love Brad Dourif so much. I love Brad Dourif as Chucky, and it's just so great that there's that moment where he's like, "You stupid bitch," and he's just like flipping out on the mom. It's just he's just cursing right in her face. It's so horrible and so great. And I love that in this show they explained that they had to put the floor on an angle so that he would roll under the couch. That was great. Yeah, I love the behind the scenes stuff. So, but I also agree that like, why is this at 90? And it gives me this kind of feeling that there's going to be some entries on this list where we're like, oh, they put this here, they put this before.
Yeah,
yeah.
I feel like that could be like something that we talk about in a later video, in a later review of this series. Is what movies and what scenes didn't make the cut. Or, what are the top 5 that we think should have been higher? What are the top 5 we think should have been lower? We could talk about that in like 101 scariest movie moments recap video that we do.
There you go. But yeah, and like one last little tangent before we do the last entry. I think that when you get lists like this, every time there's an update, there's a couple of factors that go into play. Like, obviously, I don't think they want to do like a scene for scene parallel to the Bravo one, right? They want to kind of shake it up and do something different. I also do think that you said that Bravo one was like 15 years ago. I do think that like the face of horror has changed in 15 years. Like, I have this channel, I have my comic books channel, and you have these mediums where it's like the fans look a certain way. It's usually like, white middle-aged men and stuff like that, right? Well, obviously, over the past 15 years, things have become more diverse. You have fans that all look different and stuff like that now. Things are changing. And so I think that what we might think is like, oh, well, this has to be a top 20. There's going to be new entries in there where we're like, oh, okay.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, I agree.
Yeah. It's that's one of the beauties of doing this channel with you is that like you are very progressive thinking and cool and I think that there'll be entries on here that I only know about because I've watched other documentaries like horror noir and stuff like that, and that's the beauty of Shudder itself is that you just see all these different perspectives on horror,
Yeah. Speaking of that, horror noir was on Shudder. They also have another documentary coming out later this month on queer horror, like LGBTQ horror, and I can't wait for that. Another great documentary that's on Shudder was the Scream Queen documentary about Mark Patton from A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, which was fantastic about how what he went through as a gay man trying to play a final boy, in the 80s, and that movie's legacy. So I like that Shudder includes all these and is putting out all these documentaries to focus on those groups in horror that very often do get overlooked.
Exactly. So it's very interesting to see like what is actually going to be on this list, and I look forward to talking about this every week with you. I'm hoping we can do it every Thursday around this time,
Yeah.
But let's jump into the very last entry for this episode. It's An American Werewolf in London. I have seen this one. Just a classic horror movie. I think a lot of people think this is like the definitive werewolf movie. My question to you is, do you think that this scene is the scariest scene in the movie?
No. And I wouldn't put it in the top 2. And this is one of those where I wrote down, I hope there's going to be more than one moment per movie, because again, the history teacher in me, I'm thinking of historical significance along with scare. How do you not put the transformation scene? But if you're not going to put the transformation scene, then you have to put the scene where he wakes up as the vampire and because that scene, when Charlotte and I watched it, that scene made her walk out of the room crying. It scared her so much. And she told me to shut the movie off, and she didn't want to watch it anymore. And then She came back in 10 minutes later and was like, okay, press play. And we finished the movie. To be fair, we watched American Werewolf in London with my shades wide open and a big full moon beaming in through our living room. And I kept like elbowing her and going, she was like, stop it. So, I mean, for me, when I think of this movie, it's the transformation and it's the David wakes up as a vampire with just that like, and that scene. The scene that they did was the dream sequence with the Nazi monsters, which it's such a bizarre scene.
Right.
It like very much doesn't fit with the movie. And I like that they were like, well, he's transforming into a monster, so he tries to think of the monsters of the world like Nazis. I'm like, was he? I never thought of that. It just seemed like a bizarre dream sequence.
Yeah. You know, honestly, it's funny what you're talking about with the movie, because there's a part in American Werewolf in London that actually scares me even more than all the scenes that you've mentioned. And maybe it's just me, but like there's the scene where he's in the subway in London and there's this one man that's going down the escalator and you just kind of see the wolf come onto the screen. And the way they did the practical effects for that point, it looks so realistic. And it's like, it's like, almost like it feels like found footage, you know, it's like very realistic looking.
It's like from the wolf's point of view. Yeah.
Right. It's just like that part always freaks me out for some reason. But yeah, it's a classic movie that like you said, there's some of these movies that have like multiple scenes. Like when they get up to The Exorcist, I feel like there's like at least 4 scenes in The Exorcist you could use. Right.
There's pretty much any moment between the opening and closing credits, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what the hell are you supposed to use? So we are just getting started. It looks like they did what, 12 entries this time around?
Yeah, 101 to 89. So I think
12.
That's
yeah. And what is there? 3 more entries?
There's 3 more episodes in September. So I don't know if they're going to finish in September or if they're going to carry it over into October. Because if they're doing 45-minute episodes, which we're already past, if they're doing 45-minute episodes, they're not going to get to 1 over the next 3. I thought they were going to do it in 25 at a time. I wrote numbers all the way down to 80 on my sheet, and then it ended at 89. I was like, oh.
Yeah, maybe this is going straight to Halloween. That'd be really cool.
Hey, I'm down for it. Let's keep it going.
Yeah, and I'm down for talking about it with you, my man. So, do you have anything besides this coming up on the Lastercast?
Yeah, I'm gonna be. I'll probably be posting something tomorrow. On Tuesday night, I went to a really fun 40th anniversary screening of Friday the 13th Part 3 in actual 3D. First time I had ever seen that movie in 3D at the Alamo Drafthouse in Brooklyn. It was hosted by Ted Gagan, who has directed We Are Still Here, Mohawk, really good horror director, really cool person to follow on social media. He was there. And one of the actors was there as well, and it was a lot of fun. Cool. So I'll do a quick little review about that. Also, I know you just posted yesterday. My Charlotte and I, when we were in Savannah, we visited this little cool museum called the Graveface Museum. A lot of serial killer and true crime stuff. So that was a lot of fun. That's up on the channel now. And I'm definitely going to be trying to get to the movies a little bit more now that they're putting out a bunch of classic stuff in the movies now. And there's that new vampire movie, The Invitation, that's gotten some pretty good word of mouth buzz. I might try to slip out later and see that.
Yeah. So I want to see Barbarian, and I want to see
that too. That was the other one.
Smile too. Have you seen the commercial? Have you seen the trailer for Smile?
I am embarrassed how much I want to see that movie, because that movie looks. If you just describe that movie to me, I'd be like, oh God, it's like another Truth or Dare.
Right.
But the preview is so genuinely unsettling.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like if you used to be a New Yorker. Like, if you've ever rode on the train in New York and somebody was looking at you like this, you would get the hell off the train at the next stop without even looking, because and everything in that trailer, I keep saying to myself, this movie looks so stupid, and then going, oh my God, I have to see this movie. So so yeah, Barbarian is getting great word of mouth. The Invitation's gotten some pretty good word of mouth, and is making pretty good money also. And Smile also looks good. It's that time of year.
I'm excited. Yeah, and for me, I interviewed Keith Lansdale like 2 weeks ago at this point. I've just been really swamped with work and with life. So I'm going to probably edit that video this weekend, and that'll probably go up on the channel on Monday. So we absolutely have content coming out on the Lashercast. If you guys are listening to the podcast, make sure that you check out our YouTube channel too, and vice versa. You know, if you're on the YouTube channel, you can always listen to episodes on the podcast, and maybe when you're working out or something, or going for a car ride. But me and Danny here are always talking about horror movies, horror books, horror TV shows, and we want to join the conversation with you too. So make sure to like and subscribe. And we will see you guys next Thursday around this time.